Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Hazzed, and today on the Battle for Azeroth pre-patch, I'm going to be bringing you guys some more Frost DK macros and some brand new Frost DK breath macros, because as I've been just kind of testing out a lot of my DPS, I've noticed a lot of Frost DKs seem to be having a lot of trouble with current Frost DK breath, and there really are a lot of variations with the breath that you could do to maximize your DPS in different situations. So in this video, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys some brand new macros. So let's do this.
It's who we are, it's what we do, we've come so far, and now we pay the price, so don't even cry. The world is breaking down, and I cannot leave the ground.
So let's start off looking at some breath macros. Now this macro was the one I came up with back in Warlords of Draenor, early Warlords of Draenor, and it's this simple breath macro that just allows you to proc up Breath of Sindragosa and spam Obliterates afterwards to easily keep up your breath. Generally use that when you're able to maximize your runic power, and then at the end of that, this is going to be a little bit of a newer macro. We have the Nuke Macro. Now you want to use this macro when you have about 2 seconds left on your Pillar of Frost to make sure that these two abilities benefit from your 30% to 32% extra strength from Pillar of Frost's stacking capabilities. Now this burst macro is as I said, it's new, it's kind of interesting, and it was kind of hard to get it to work correctly. Now it's show tooltip Frostwyrm's Fury, cast sequence reset equals 180 Frostwyrm's Fury, comma space chains of ice. Now I'll have all these down in the comments below so they'll be easy to copy over, so you're not like squinting at the screen trying to copy these. So this is just going to be like the explanation. If you need the macros, they're down below. Fairly simple, easy. But cast sequence, basically this ability is going to allow you in 2 buttons to use Frostwyrm's Fury and Chains of Ice at the end of your breath, making it a lot easier for you to burst, because coming from Legion, I have a tendency to use my dragon, but not necessarily use my Chains of Ice at the correct time to burst on the target. So I made this button to make it fairly simple to switch from, you know, the 1 button macro breath going on to using this nuke cooldown that'll throw out your Frostwyrm's Fury and your Chains of Ice at the end of it to deal a lot of damage. So this macro is the one I use generally in Mythic Pluses or in PvP situations when I want to present the maximized amount of damage to a target. What you want to do, of course, is pre-pull your runic power and then lay out the breath on the target, which we're going to go ahead and do. The other things you want to do is pre-pop Remorseless Winter and hit Pillar of Frost, run in with your breath and start breathing on the target. Use any pre-pots you have earlier on if you want, and use Empowered Rune Weapon about a 50% way through. Now at 2 seconds you're going to want to hit your other burst macro to throw out Dragon and Icy Chains, because that's where your major burst damage is going to be coming from with your breath, and of course keep it up for as long as possible afterwards to maximize the breath damage, and of course most likely kill the target. Fairly simple to use, fairly easy that way. I'd say the hardest part about it is using the Empowered Rune Weapon and switching back to the Obliterates in time, but generally if you do that around 50%, you'll have more than enough time. You'll even probably have time to end or kind of insert any Howling Blast you get into that rotation to deal the maximized amount of damage. Now inserting Howling Blast into that is very important, because Howling Blasts are going to deal a lot of damage, and that's something that the kind of quick burst macro that I've came up with allows you to do with switching up a couple talents or abilities in there. Just in their placement allows for some reason Howling Blast to be in there. It's insane. But let's go ahead and get to the next breath macro. So to explain this macro is going to be a little bit more complicated than the other one. This one is pretty interesting. I'm calling it version 3.0. Now this breath macro is for quick bursting on a target after 2 Obliterates, and then it pops Empowered Rune Weapon, uses Breath of Sindragosa, and Obliterate afterwards. And you're going to use probably about 7 Obliterates, and then that's when you're going to use again that one-shot nuke button to throw out your Dragon and of course your Icy Chains, making that burst quite a bit easier, in my opinion. Now, the thing about quick bursting, I've noticed a lot while I'm watching a lot of Frost DKs, is they get a little bit of downtime and their breath either falls off or they're not hitting the buttons quick enough, because when doing a quick burst, you have to have everything perfect or your breath is going to fall off. Now, this macro, interestingly enough, is actually going to give you spaces and quite a bit of leeway that you're not going to lose your breath, let's say if you get stunned or something like that quick bursting, because I'd say that's one of the worst parts about quick bursting, is if you get blinded or something during that, you have to be very, very quick to trinket and only wasting one global cooldown and getting back to your rotation very fast and not lose your breath. Turns out to be fairly hard. This macro gives you quite a bit more leeway with that. Now, this macro is going to use your Rune weapon for you. It's going to proc up Sindragosa. It's going to use quite a few things, but the opener is going to be exactly the same as the other ones. You got to do the same thing. You got to prop Remorseless Winter, and you're going to use Pillar of Frost. Now, with this button, I'm just going to spam it off the get-go. It's going to use 2 Obliterates. It's going to use Empowered Rune weapon, and it's going to use Breath of Sindragosa. Now, before, when I was doing this, we were using Breath of Sindragosa directly after the 2 Obliterates. Now, the thing about Breath of Sindragosa is it's not on a global cooldown with the other abilities. So using it before Empowered Rune Weapon instead of after it is going to give us like a slight second later breath than what we were previously doing, which for some reason, being that it just makes the rotation so much better. It makes it a lot better. We'll have time for Howling Blast quick bursting, and we'll have time to deal maximum pressure. So we're going to go ahead and show off this macro a little bit here on the target, make sure we nuke at the right seconds, and you usually can insert a Howling Blast proc that you get, because generally you're going to use about 4 Obliterates before you have a chance to do that, and you usually will have a Howling Blast proc by then to insert, and you need to use the Howling Blast. They do some of the highest damage during your burst, right behind Breath of Sindragosa, if you use them correctly. So let's go ahead and pre-pop here. We're going to go ahead and use our Remorseless Winter, hitting our Icebound, and we're going to go ahead and spam this macro, spamming the crud out of this macro. We got breath up. We're going to have about 2 seconds right there. We can insert our Howling Blast, and going back into these Obliterates, Howling Blast, and we're going to nuke the target right here. Boom, boom, 2 giant burst macros. We hit 12k burst on that target right there, and we can finish out our burst right there. Now, that is some quick damage you can put on a target. We did about 200k damage in that small quick burst right there. It makes it really easy to do, and for some reason at the start of that I said Icebound when I meant Pillar of Frost, which was weird. But anyways, that macro deals about 200k damage in that short amount of time. Now, the one thing you notice about Breath of Sindragosa is it did about 67k damage. It's slightly shorter than if you were to pull your runic power on a target and deal it that way, because it is slightly more elongated. You'll deal about 10 to 15k more damage from breath if you pull your runic power, but being that it's just a small slight difference, if you were going to do DPS versus DPS or something along those lines, or you're in a situation where you're not going to survive very long and you don't have time to pull runic power, this macro will help you out a ton, especially also in Mythic Pluses. Let's say you don't have time to pull runic power, things like that, or the boss is going to die before you even can get off an elongated breath. You could use the quick burst macro, and it works really well, as you just saw, to actually put up your DPS quite high very quickly. That's the one I've been excited about. That's the one I was working on. That's the one that's like a huge game changer in my opinion as far as DPS versus DPS in bursting wars. So we're going to be talking about some survival macros now, and really a lot of people feel like our survivability is lower on a Frost DK at the moment, and I wouldn't say it's lower. Our survivability is definitely higher than it used to be on a current Frost DK, but since a lot of classes have quite a bit of burst in the pre-patch, and of course the current game is not balanced around pre-patch, it's balanced around 120 PvP, things are not going to seem correct in those certain ways. So the one thing I like to use for survivability is an Icebound Fortitude macro with A/cast Death Strike. It's the same one we were using in Legion. It's not nearly as effective since we don't get the 300% healing buff, but what it does do is it throws up Icebound Fortitude, and if I press the button twice, it'll Death Strike for me. So if you've got a Death Strike proc or something along those lines, it can definitely save your butt as a Frost DK. And also, if you have Rooting Power procced up, you throw up IBF and you're spamming that button. It makes it a lot easier than trying to switch up your buttons and hit another button than just simply tapping that one over and over again. And of course, if you just want to Icebound Fortitude to get out of a stun or something like that, all you have to do is hit the macro once, don't hit it twice, and you won't death strike. Now, the other macro I'm going to talk about for some survivability is going to literally be a death strike macro, and it's under this giant pile of macros in here somewhere. There it is. And basically it's a mouse over macro for death strike, so you can hit a target that you're hitting and death strike something else. So let's say you're fighting a hunter inside PvP situations and you can't get close to the hunter, you're losing a lot of health, you need to heal up with death strikes. You can instead use this macro mouse over his pet and death strike the pet to give yourself some self-healing capabilities as you close the gap, because switching between a hunter pet and a hunter, it can be frustrating when trying to use death strike inside of battlegrounds or a 1v1 situation like dueling. Another macro I like to use for both defensive and offensive abilities is, of course, a chains macro that you can mouse over the target, being that, especially in battleground situations, you're not going to have 6 targets focused, and spamming chains by clicking on each target is not good for dealing damage or keeping pressure up on your current target, since you can keep melee attacking them, at least since melee damage is quite a bit of damage, and keep it up on them and still manage to slow the other targets around, because we do have our 70% slow back, which is a very strong slow, and if you can kite somebody out while fighting another person and then fight the next guy afterwards, it greatly increases your chance of being able to win that battle, even if you're outnumbered. So let's say I'm fighting this guy, it's a mage or something, he blinks away from me, there's a warrior running in, and instead of me fighting both of them at once, I'll hit the warrior with the chains and close the distance on the mage. Makes it a lot easier to do, especially when there's multiple targets, like let's say 3 targets, maybe even 4 targets. I'm about to be surrounded, I'm going to kite out, I've got a healer back here somewhere way back there that I need to kite to. I could quickly hit multiple chains on different targets and move away at the same time, and still, of course, have the target I want to be dealing DPS on focused right there. It becomes very easy to multi-chain targets for survivability and defensive reasons. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little update on burst macros. I hope it helps out your damages of Frost DK. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions about the macros or breath. Most likely there will be quite a few people that are going to tell me it's not working for them, but yeah, we can fix that. We can fix that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, leave a like down below if you did, and until next time, this was your boy Hazzed.